We're good? Okay. So, vitamins. We have fat soluble vitamins. We've got water soluble vitamins. Okay. The fat soluble ones include your vitamin A, D, E, and K. Okay. The water soluble ones are your vitamin C and vitamin B. Now, vitamin B has got a lot to it, the whole B complex. You can have B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, B7, B9, and B12. Now, B1 is thiamine, B2 is riboflavin, B3 is niacin, B5 is pantothenic acid, B6 is just B6, B7 is biotin, B9 is folate, and B12 is cobalamin. Okay? The blue ones underneath these include the energy releasing B vitamins. So your B1, B2, B3, B5, and B6 and B7. Okay. And then your hematopoietic. So they stimulate red blood cell synthesis. Include your B5, B6, B9, and B12. Okay. We'll see more of that over there. But first up, let's start with vitamin A. Okay, your fat solubles, and then we'll move on to water soluble. So vitamin A, we want to come here and take a look at the different forms, active forms. You can have retinol or retinal and retinoic acid. So retinol and retinal are interconvertible. Retinoic acid can be, it's an active form, but you can actually also get it from converting it from retinal. Okay. Now, what does vitamin A have to do in general? Okay. Well, it functions in dim vision or dark vision. Okay. And so, in your eyes, you have your rods and cones, okay? Your rod cells specifically, they contain this protein called rhodopsin. And rhodopsin inside of it has opsin, which is bound to cis-retinal, okay? Now, when visible light hits the retina, okay, opsin separates from cis-retinal, and opsin will go and do a lot of different physiological things, right? Including activating different receptors to bring in the action potential that leads to, going up the optic nerve, going to the brain, and saying, "Hey, there's light." All right, and cisretinal will then get transformed into transretinal, and then subsequently into cisretinal again. Now, after opsin is done, all of the physiological roles it does, it'll combine with cisretinal again until another wave of visible light hits and it'll separate again. Okay? So that's what vitamin A does. All right? Okay, now moving on to vitamin D. So vitamin D, you can get it from a couple places. You can get it from the diet, or you can get it from your skin. Okay, so endogenous synthesis. If it is from the diet, you can have ergocalciferol or cholecalciferol. Ergocalciferol is vitamin D2, and cholecalciferol is D3. Right? D3 is from your animals. D2 is from the plants. Okay. Now, let's talk about the endogenous synthesis. So here's your sun. Okay, and inside of our skin, we have a molecule called 7-dehydroxycholesterol, right? So right here, 7-dehydroxycholesterol. And after the sun hits, right, specifically ultraviolet B light, 7-dehydroxycholesterol gets turned into pre-vitamin D3 or cholecalciferol. And then pre-vitamin D3 will get turned into vitamin D3 in the circulation. Okay? After that, vitamin D3 will circulate to the liver. In the liver, it'll interact with a special enzyme called 25-hydroxylase. 25-hydroxylase would actually place a hydroxyl group on the 25th carbon, okay, and turn it into 25-hydroxy vitamin D3, okay. And then this molecule continues circulating into the kidneys, where it sees this special enzyme, 1-alpha hydroxylase. 1-alpha hydroxylase puts another hydroxyl group on the first carbon. Okay, so the molecule that we end up with is 125 hydroxy vitamin D3 or calcitriol. So what's the role of calcitriol? Well, calcitriol can cause, it's really important in calcium homeostasis. So it can actually cause calcium absorption from the intestines, okay? And it can cause calcium resorption from the bone by stimulating osteoclasts specifically. Now, I should mention that this part over here, the bone portion, doesn't happen unless there is no calcium within the intestines, okay? Because remember, you want to regulate calcium levels in the blood, and if there is low calcium in the blood and there's no calcium to be absorbed from the intestines, you're going to actually break down the calcium in the bone and release it into the blood, okay? But just know that this doesn't typically happen, okay? Now, another thing with vitamin D is that a deficiency of it can lead to rickets in children, osteomalacia, osteoporosis, just any sort of bone disorders. Okay. Okay. So that was vitamin D. Now let's talk about vitamin E. Okay. Vitamin E comes in two flavors. We have tocopherols or tocotrienols. Now, with tocopherols and tocotrienols, you can have an alpha, beta, gamma, or delta isoform depending on the methyl group on the carbon of these on the carbons on 5, 7, and 8 within the chrominal ring. Okay. What are its functions? Well, vitamin E is a antioxidant. Okay. You'll find it typically in the cell membrane. Okay. And here's just an example of what it can do. So you have a vitamin E in the reduced form, okay, which can go and interact with some free radicals, right? And then it'll get oxidized, and then it'll neutralize the free radicals, right? And we'll talk about how it can become reduced again. Now, what are some of these free radicals? Well, vitamin E actually prevents lipid peroxidation, and as you guys know, polyunsaturated fatty acids highly susceptible to lipid peroxidation if they become oxidized. All right, and they are in specific, lipoprotein particles like LDLs, right? That can lead to atherogenesis. Okay. Also, vitamin E is responsible for decreasing alcohol-induced liver injury. Okay, because alcohol makes a lot of reactive oxygen species, right? Specifically acetaldehyde. Okay, acetaldehyde specifically after it's broken down from ethanol. But vitamin E helps get rid of those. Okay. All right, and it can also help reduce some of the cellular mechanisms in aging as well. Right. So some of the free radicals that are produced by aging. Anyways, now before we talk about vitamin K, I got to mention something about vitamin C here. Vitamin C is super important in coming over here, right? This oxidized vitamin E, and actually converting it back into its reduced form. Okay, and why is that? Because vitamin C is also an antioxidant. Okay, it can also perform its function. All right. Okay, good. So now let's move on to vitamin K. All right. All right. You can pause it. Okay. So vitamin K. Vitamin K again, last of the fat soluble vitamins, and then we'll go into health. Okay. So vitamin K, it acts as a coenzyme for carboxylation reactions. Okay. And main functions you should really know is that it's anti-hemorrhagic, so it plays a role in activating certain clotting proteins. Okay, thrombin being, or prothrombin actually being one of the main ones. You can find vitamin K both naturally and synthetically. In natural forms, you can have K1 or K2, so you can have phylloquinone or menaquinone, also called MK7. All right. The synthetic form, you can have menadione. All right, which is actually given to animals. So again, what are the functions of vitamin K? Well, I said that it's important for it's a coenzyme for the carboxylation of certain proteins, okay? Specifically a GLA protein, okay? So it's part of the enzyme that carboxylates the GLA protein, okay? And it can also be found in the bones as well, but You don't got to worry about that. So vitamin K, like I said, it stimulates the activation of clotting factors. Okay, and it leads to the formation of this platelet plug. Okay, it's a whole different story. It's like long, very long process. And vitamin K2 specifically stimulates osteocalcin, which is a protein produced by osteoblasts, which leads to mineralization and maturation of bone. Okay, so in this case, you can see that vitamin K and actually vitamin D work in sort of a synergistic way, where vitamin D causes calcium absorption from the intestines into the blood, and vitamin K utilizes those calciums in the blood and causes mineralization and maturation and bone deposition. Okay, nice. So that's going to complete the fat soluble vitamins. Let's talk about vitamin C. Okay, so the first of the water soluble vitamins is vitamin C, and really, vitamin C can have two of these forms, right? It can take a form of ascorbic acid and dehydroascorbic acid, okay, which is really the oxidized form of it, okay? Now, ascorbic acid is what's most found when you're eating food, okay? And lack of vitamin C can lead to scurvy, okay? And again, the reason why it can lead to scurvy is because there's a diminished vascular wall strength, okay? Among other things. But anyways, so vitamin C though, it can really be destroyed easily, okay, by light, heat exposure, alkaline environment, and yeah, but it is actually stable in low pHs, okay? Now, what are the functions of it? It's important in DNA synthesis, in synthesis of carnitine, collagen, tyrosine, neurotransmitters, and hormones, okay? And I didn't put it on the tyrosine, but the amino acid tyrosine, if you do synthesize it using vitamin C, right, tyrosine can actually lead to the formation of other things like thyroid hormone, or eventually epinephrine, norepinephrine, right, and even carnitine. But that's also carnitine can be made from the amino acid lysine. Anyways, collagen, it's everywhere. Okay, it's in your bones, it's in your skin, it's in your um, joints, ligaments, blood vessels, literally everywhere. Okay, and so you would imagine if you don't have collagen, why you would have diminished vascular wall strength. Okay, carnitine is involved in transfer of long chain fatty acids into the mitochondria, so you can start beta oxidation. It's also involved a little bit in fatty acid synthesis. Um, so yeah, I'm just giving reasons why these are important, okay, and the lack of them, why it would be bad. And it also enhances your immune function and iron absorption. Okay, all right. So not much for vitamin C. Okay, now on to the B complexes. Okay, here we go. Let's start with the first one, B1, thiamine. Okay, so thiamine is well, actually, it's easily destroyed by heat for first things, and a lack of B1 can actually lead to beriberi, right? Which is just means weakness. Okay, weakness, apathy, fatigue, all of that. Okay. Anyways, it comes in two forms: thiamine or thiamine pyrophosphate. Thiamine is the one you're going to get in plants, okay? And it's really the free form, okay? It's not phosphorylated, so it doesn't really have to be digested in order for it to be absorbed. It can be readily absorbed. Thiamine pyrophosphate, the reason why it's called pyrophosphate is because they have two phosphates on it, okay? So, and this is the one you're really getting in animals, right? And this is the one that has to be digested first, freed from the phosphates, and then it can be digested, okay? Sorry, absorbed. All right. Okay. What are the functions? Well, it acts as a coenzyme for making pentoses and an ADPH. Okay. It's responsible in energy metabolism. Again, that makes sense if you just think of the role of NADPH. Um, it's also important in a non-coenzyme function. It's important in stimulating chloride transporters in nerve cells and stimulating nerve impulses by the regulation of sodium channels and protein phosphorylations. Okay? All right. That's thiamine, right? And we'll keep referring back to each of these ones as we go. Okay? Anyways, that's thiamine B1. Now we got riboflavin B2. Okay? You're going to get this in animal foods. Okay? Only in animal foods. And again, it's sensitive to light, so it can be destroyed, some of it, by light. And you'll find riboflavin in highly metabolic organs like the heart, like the kidney, like the liver. Okay? And why? Well, it's related to its functions, okay, which we'll come back to in a second. But how is riboflavin eaten? Like, in what structure is it eaten? Well, it's eaten with riboflavin, the actual molecule, bound to flavoproteins. Okay, and in order for it to be digested, you have to free it from the flavoproteins, so that then it can be absorbed. All right. Again, riboflavin actually has the actual flavus and the ribitol tail as well. Okay, the flavin head and the ribitol tail. Anyway, so now that you're in the cell, okay, let's say you absorbed it and now it's in the cell. Okay, what do you do with it? Well, you can turn it into its coenzyme forms, FMN and FAD. Okay, so flavin mononucleotide or flavin adenine dinucleotide. But how do you do that? Well, you have this enzyme called flavokinase, right, which actually take this B2, this riboflavin, and phosphorylate it and turn it into FMN. Okay, or you can have FAD synthetase, which again grabs B2, phosphorylates it, and makes it into an FAD. Okay. Why are these guys so important? They're important because you can find these in the Krebs cycle. You can find them in the electron transport chain. Okay, and again, without these, you wouldn't actually be able to function. FMN is found in all the complexes. It's complex 1, 2, 3, 4. FAD though, it picks up the electrons from the Krebs and then drops them off at complex 2. Okay, again, so you can see why this is so important. And again, if you understand carb and fat metabolism, you'll understand why, again, this is so important. Okay? So, what are its functions? Again, they're coenzymes for fat metabolism and carbohydrate metabolism, right? And again, you should know, right? Glucose goes through glycolysis, which generates NADHs, FADHs, and then find pyruvate. Pyruvate eventually goes into Krebs cycle, right? Which again, you generate FADHs, which then go to the electron transport chain. Same thing for fat metabolism, right? These fatty acids, right? After being digested and absorbed, they can go through beta oxidation, right? Which generates a significant amount of NADHs and FADHs, which will then go to also the electron transport chain. Okay, so that's why riboflavin is super important. Okay, in energy metabolism. Okay, so now let's talk about B3 niacin. Okay, okay, so niacin or B3. All right. Two forms it can come in: nicotinic acid, which is found in plants, or nicotinamide. Okay. Now I said nicotinic acid is found in plants, but what do you normally eat when you're eating animal foods? Well, when you're eating animal foods, you're actually ingesting it in forms of NAD and NADP. Okay. Now, what does a lack of niacin lead to? It can lead to pellagra. Okay. And pellagra is characterized by the 4 Ds. You got dermatitis, diarrhea, death, and dementia. Okay. Okay. Now, in the cell, right? So let's say you took your nicotinic acid or nicotinamide, right, and you absorbed it. Now you're in the cell. What do you do with it? Okay. Well, you got B3, all right, and you actually turn it into its coenzyme forms, NADP or NAD. Okay. Again, you guys know that NADH or NADPH, right? They're super heavily involved in energy metabolism. Okay, NADP specifically is a powerful reducing agent, and also it's involved in the pentose phosphate pathway and fat metabolism a lot. Okay, And you'll see that here. Okay, so what are the functions of niacin? Along the lines of what we've been talking about. So carbohydrate metabolism, fat metabolism, synthesis of fat and cholesterol. Very important because you need NADP in those. You need NADP. Without NADP, you cannot make de novo fat or lipid synthesis or cholesterol. And you guys know how much cholesterol is important, right? It can be used to make vitamin D, certain hormones like testosterone. Okay, it can be incorporated into the cell membrane to make it more rigid. Okay, um, it can make bile. Bile, super important bile. Okay, yeah. And also its functions in DNA replication, cell differentiation, and repair. Um, and again, diarrhea, one of the symptoms of pellagra. It's due to the fact that there is less DNA replication or cell differentiation of the actual enterocytes in the crypts of Lieberkon, which are actually these little divots in the villi, okay? And due to the reduced mitosis that goes on there every like 4 to 5 days or something, that can lead to that diarrhea. Okay. Anyways, that's that. Um, one more thing to mention is that, as I said, thiamine, right, was important for the synthesis of NADPH, right? But niacin can be turned into NADP in the cell. Okay, it's just good to make the connection there, right? So thiamine is a coenzyme required for the synthesis of NADP. Okay, all right. Now let's move on to B5, pantothenic acid. Okay, B5. B5, it can be destroyed by an alkaline environment and an acidic environment, as well as in heating conditions and freezing conditions. Okay. It is a prosthetic group. It's important to understand. It's a metabolically active prosthetic group of coenzyme A. Okay, very important and very important enzyme. Okay, now coenzyme A. I'm sure you've seen it in many different things. There is I can't even remember the enzymes, but acetyl-CoA carboxylase. There is I think a pyruvate CoA carboxylase. There's as many enzymes, okay, that use CoA as part of them, okay? And what are some of the functions of pantothenic acid? Well, as part of coenzyme A, it interacts, it interacts in amino acid, carbohydrate, and fat metabolism as part of the acyl carrier protein, okay? It interacts in fatty acid synthesis. And the acyl carrier protein is actually part of the fatty acid synthase. Okay, so you have this enzyme, right, called the fatty acid synthase, and on one end of it, you have this thing called the acyl carrier protein. Okay, which basically just holds on to the hydrocarbon chain that you're making the fatty acids with. Okay, all right, so that's B5. Let's go on to B6. Again, thankfully, not as much stuff to know, but there are many different vitamers, okay, or different active forms. You have pyridoxal, you have pyridoxamine, pyridoxal, or you can also call it pyridoxine. Okay. Now, pyridoxal is the one with the aldehyde form. Pyridoxamine, of course, has the amine group. The pyridoxal or pyridoxine is the one with the OH group, right? Yeah. Anyways, and these are all vitamins, okay? Meaning they are all interchangeable, okay? They're all active as well, okay? Now, alongside these three, each of them have a 5' phosphate derivative, okay? I'm not going to write it out, right? I haven't written it out. All you have to do is just say 5' pyridoxal phosphate, okay? Or so on and so on and so on, okay? So what are the functions of B6? Well, it's a coenzyme for carbohydrate and amino acid metabolism. It is a coenzyme for the synthesis of heme, so red blood cell synthesis, okay, which we talked about B6 being one of the hematopoietic ones, okay? And that finishes B6. B7, B7, guys, it's the lack of B7 can lead to egg white injury. Why egg white injury? Well, because egg whites, they contain this protein called avidin, and avidin actually binds irreversibly to biotin with a high affinity. Okay, now um, biotin, right, will then not be able to be absorbed. Okay, which can lead to egg white injury. How do you prevent this? Cook the damn egg. Okay, heat it up. Avidin is heat labile, all right, which means it gets destroyed by heat. Okay. All right, so what are the functions of biotin? Well, again, it's a prosthetic group and a mobile carboxyl carrier for four carboxylase enzymes. I'm not going to even try to say all of them, okay? But what you should know is that they're all involved in these functions, like the metabolism of lipids, glucose, and amino acids. For lipids, specifically, it gives these acetate units, right, for fatty acid synthesis, okay? And it can assist in the synthesis of odd chain fatty acids. Right? Odd chain meaning that instead of like your normal 16 carbon long, you have like a 5 carbon long. Okay, odd chain. For glucose, it actually replenishes the oxaloacetate for the Krebs cycle. Okay, and for the amino acids, it helps with the metabolism of certain amino acids, and it also helps in the catabolic pathway for leucine. Okay. All right, so that was B7. B9, which is folate, um, was discovered to actually cure, alongside B12, by the way, it was discovered to cure megaloblastic anemia, okay? Large and immature red blood cells, okay? And very few in number, all right, which makes sense, it's anemia. So, how does it get digested and absorbed? Well, we have folate, okay? And if you actually look at the structure of folate, it has about 3 to 11 glutamates or glutamic acid, right? Your negatively charged amino acid. And in order for it to be absorbed, brush border enzymes like dihydrofolate, okay, actually start cleaving off these glutamates, right, until there's only one left, okay? And actually, importantly, this process requires the NADP into NADPH, okay? And so you guys already know how important this is, right? You're already using NADPH, which vitamin? It was niacin, okay? That's already very important. Now, after you do this, after you start removing those glutamates until only one remains, okay, you get tetrahydrofolate, right? So what are the functions? Well, it assists in amino acid metabolism. It has a role in DNA synthesis. It is important for the catabolism of homocysteine, okay, because elevated homocysteine levels lead to damage in the blood vessels and I think free oxygen, reactive oxygen species. I don't know. Anyways, for a decreased rate of neural tube defects, okay, were shown with an increased ingestion of folate in, of course, pregnant women, periconceptional phase. All right. So yeah, they should fortify with folic acid, specifically a synthetic one because it's more bioavailable. And anyways, the decreased rates of neural tube defects led to a decreased rates of spina bifida, okay, which is actually just a open neural tube, okay. So the actual spinal cord is actually just out, and there's many different types. There's like 3 different types. So that finishes B9. Let's talk about B12, the big beast. So vitamin B12, vitamin B12. This is also called cobalamin. Okay, why cobalamin? Because it has a cobalt group right in the center, right in the center. Okay, and 5 different groups can actually attach to the cobalt atom. Okay, you can have cyanide, you can have water, you can have a hydroxyl group, a methyl group, or a 5' deoxyadenosine. And these are all named accordingly. But before I talk about this, the liver. Liver is an organ that has a lot of vitamin B12. It stores a lot of vitamin B12, okay? And vitamin B12 can actually be stored for about 3 to 5 years, okay? Unlike many of the other water-soluble vitamins. And I forgot to mention this, but Fat-soluble vitamins can also be stored a lot, okay, alongside the fat, right, because they're fat-soluble. So whenever you need them, they can get released, okay? Therefore, deficiency is highly unlikely in these, okay? And toxicity, in fact, is more likely with fat-soluble ones. Anyways, they can be stored for 3 to 5 years. Um, Therefore, the symptoms of deficiency can be hard to recognize, okay? And again, B12 only found in animal foods, not in veggies, grains, and fruits. Okay, so if you're a vegetarian, watch out for this because a lot of vegetarian diets can actually lead to anemias. Okay, and that's diet-induced anemia, primarily due to the fact that B12 is not there. Okay. Anyways, um, what are the 5 groups that can attach to the cobalt atom? We talked about them. What are their respective names? Cyanocobalamin, hydrocobalamin. You can also call it aquacobalamin. You can have hydroxycobalamin, methylcobalamin, and 5' deoxyadenosylcobalamin. Okay? Now these two, methylcobalamin and 5' deoxyadenosylcobalamin, these guys are the active coenzyme forms. Okay? And the rest of these guys have to be actually converted into these. Okay? Now, um, the cobalt atom itself. Okay? Increasing the consumption of the cobalt atom won't actually lead to more B12 synthesis. Okay, it's actually the availability of the B12 that leads to the all the physiological functions. Okay, all right. So what are the functions? Well, again, it's a coenzyme for the conversion of homocysteine into methionine. Okay, and it's important for the synthesis and degradation of the amino acids leucine and propionate. And the lack of B12 can actually lead to no active folate coenzymes, which can lead to an arrested DNA synthesis, cell differentiation and maturation, and this can all lead to large cell formation, which we talked about, megaloblastic anemia. Okay. A lack of B12 leads to nerve demyelination, okay, which can lead to not passive, progressive, or short-term neurological abnormalities. Okay. All right. So that is going to complete the functions. But how does it get absorbed? Okay. In this one, um, and this one, there's actually a diagram for the digestion and absorption. So here you have your stomach. Okay. And over here you have the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. Okay. Here's your pyloric sphincter. Okay. The antrum, cardia, body. Okay. Now, how does B12 actually? First of all, B12, in order for it to be functional, it has to be absorbed in the way it is. Okay. It does not. It can't be digested at all. Okay. Or else it loses its function. All right. Now, in the small intestine, sorry, in the stomach, you actually make a glycoprotein, R protein. Okay. And you make another glycoprotein that's released from the parietal cells. If you remember, those are the ones that make your hydrochloric acid. Okay. And these parietal cells, they also release a mucoprotein or glycoprotein called intrinsic factor. Okay. Now, when B12 enters from the cardia, from the esophagus into the cardia, into the stomach, okay, it's prevented from getting degraded by the low pH of the stomach by binding to R protein. Okay, and after it binds to R protein, it forms this B12 and R complex, and then it'll escape the digestion and the chemical breakdown that goes on in the stomach, right? It'll go through the pyloric sphincter. If you guys remember uh, with each peristaltic contraction, right, of the oblique longitudinal layers, right, you'll get about 1 to 3 milliliters of chyme pushed out into the duodenum, right? And then the duodenum actually is connected with the hepatopancreatic ampulla, which releases bile, releases bicarbonate, and all these different things to decrease, or sorry, actually increase the alkaline environment in the duodenum. Okay, so it's not acidic, right? Because remember, acidic chyme is coming in, and you want to actually neutralize that. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, the B12 and the R complex will enter into the duodenum. Okay, and in the duodenum, The ARC protein gets actually hydrolyzed, right? And the B12 will now bind to intrinsic factor. Okay. Once it binds to the intrinsic factor, they're going to travel down the jejunum, down to the ileum. At the level of the ileum, okay, you're going to have these enterocytes with specific receptors on them for the B12 and intrinsic factor. Okay. And we've gone ahead here, took a portion, and we zoomed in. All right. So here's your enterocyte. Here's the receptor specific for it, and here is your B12 and intrinsic factor complex. Okay, they're going to bind to it. You're going to get endocytosed in. Okay, and then you can actually get the physiological functions of B12 after. Okay, all right. So that's pretty much going to complete all of the vitamins. Nice.